Dave Bolger here, and welcome to Had I Known, conversations with interesting members of the Hamilton College community. This week's guest is Kyandreia Jones, class of 2019. All right, got a fun one this week. Who remembers Choose Your Own Adventure books? When I was in elementary school, the section where they kept the Choose Your Own Adventure books was probably the highest trafficked section of my elementary school library. Do you remember those? You're reading a story and you'd come to a point where it would say to open the door, turn to page 18. To continue walking down the path, go to page 32. And then you'd make your choice and then continue reading on the story. Or admittedly, if you were like me, you'd go, oh, maybe it's go to 32. Let me open it up just a little bit. Oh, it looks like the story ends. Nope, we'll go to page 18. But I used to love those books. You feel like you were controlling the story. Well, this week's guest, Kyandreia Jones, has written a few of those books. So I was delighted to get to talk to her, an impressive young alumnus. She was first published at the age of 20. She's clearly wise beyond her years. And as I'm sure you'll hear through this conversation, she's clearly got a lot left to write about. We spend a lot of time on this show talking to people well-established in their careers. But I think it's also good to get the perspective of a young alum who has already established a strong foundation of her career and is clearly destined for great things. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you do too. Here is Kyandreia Jones, class of 2019. Good. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for doing this.
Pleasure to meet you too. I'm very excited. I've never been on a podcast before, so.
Well, I have a feeling as the as your writing career grows, you'll be on many. So we'll get the practice out of the way for you here.
Appreciate that, Dave. Thank you.
Very
empowering. Now I got to go do it.
There you go. And you're Florida based, is that right?
Yes, I'm right in between Miami and Fort Lauderdale.
Okay. How are things in the sunshine?
You know, they're sunny, at least. We'll say that. They're at least sunny, so it keeps me honest. I don't miss the winter. I do miss the fall, though. I will say the Northeast has it made with the fall. The changing of the leaves,
sure. Unparalleled.
So I do miss that.
Did you grow up in Florida?
Yes, born and raised in South Florida.
Okay. So that's a big difference, going from southern Florida to central New York.
You know, that's one way to put it, a big difference. It was very, very shocking to both my senses, my physical senses, and also just like it was mind-blowing to see snow for the first time. I never saw snow until like October at Hamilton. And it was like the cute little like flurries. So I was like, oh, this is cute, whatever. And then winter hit. And I was like, they lied to me. I don't know what. Yeah. No one prepared me for winter. But I definitely got a good coat, as everyone told me to do. And then everything else was pretty much just mindset. It's like, all right, it's going to be cold. All right.
I would regularly question, and still do because I still live in the Northeast, question why people would choose to live someplace that going outside causes physical pain.
Because you're in Massachusetts, right?
I am, yeah. When the air actually hurts you, there's something wrong. I think the world's trying to tell you, don't stay here.
Yeah, I never forget when I got that email from Hamilton. It was like, it's negative 20 degrees outside. If you don't wear mittens or a hat, you will lose limbs. And I was like, where am I? Like, what is this? What in the world? Someone could pick me up. I was so horrified.
So then you took that to say, okay, I'm going to do my 4 years and then I'm out and right back to South Florida.
Pretty much, yes. That was a really good indication to come back home to South Florida. Besides my other 4 siblings, 5 now. I was like, all right, I need to go back home to the warmth.
Wow. And how did you, what brought you up north to Hamilton?
So actually, I got a view book from Hamilton, like as a senior in high school. And I was like, that's hilarious. Like this random place in like upstate New York. I'm in South Florida. Like how on earth would I ever get there? But also I was like, but it had this emphasis on writing. And I was like, I've always wanted to write since like the 4th grade. I was like, oh, wow, this is so cool, but it's so out of my reach. And then I found out about this opportunity called Posse. Mm-hmm. The Posse organization sends like people who are often overlooked, these leaders, to different schools across the nation. And Hamilton was actually one of the partner schools. And I was like, oh, it's serendipity. Like, it's time to just figure out a way to get to Hamilton. And it was really easy to sell the whole writing thing in my posse interviews. So there's like 3 interviews, and I kind of go up against all these kids in South Florida. But I was like, oh, I got writing, so hopefully that helps me a lot, and it did. That and just being very weird. I think that helped me stand out among my cohorts and my peers. So I got posse with 9 other people, and then me and my 10, well, all 10 of us went to Hamilton, and we
Yep.
had Catherine Doran, who's a philosophy professor, as our mentor. And that's pretty much how I got to Hamilton. And the way they told me I got posse was, do you have a good coat? And I was like, what? I'm in South Florida. I'm like, what is that even? Like, what is a good coat? Like, you got posse, you got Hamilton. I was like, oh, I need a coat. I really do need a coat. Let's go figure out what that means. It turns out I got the wrong coat immediately. I got to Hamilton and people were like, you need a coat that like it's not cloth. Like you need a coat that actually like kind of like a raincoat, but of
Yeah.
course winter edition. I was like, oh, no one told me the, the different types of coats I needed to have. So that was funny. But that's how I got Hamilton. It definitely felt like I guess fate in the most cheesy way possible because I did see the view book first. I don't know how I got that view book to this day, and then I ended up getting Posse, which led me straight to Hamilton.
That's really interesting. And then once you got over the shock of the cold and being in the Northeast, and that's there's Northeast, and then there's Central New York, which is the to me, I grew up in New York. To me, that was like borderline Canada, which I know it's not, but that's what it felt like to me.
Definitely
But
Canada.
what was tell me what the feeling was like when you first got there? What was your initial reaction and experience there?
So outside of the cold itself, which still is a big shock, I still think about that. I'm just like, wow. I guess the biggest thing that stood out to me just how beautiful the campus is. Like everyone
Mm.
always says it, but it's so true. So you can't get upset. And even comedians would come to Hamilton and call like Beinecke the creepy dollhouse. And I was like, wow, that's a great way to put it. So it was really fun to kind of see just how different everything looked, but so beautiful and inspiring. Like even
Yeah.
from like one of my favorite buildings was the art center.
Hmm.
It's just it looks like art itself. They did a good job because it looks like what it's supposed to be, which is inspiring to artists. And I really stood out. It really stood out to me just how different it looked compared to the rest of the campus. Like Lightside definitely seems like more historically based. You kind of see the legacy of Hamilton just looking at Lightside and its architecture versus like Dark Side. It has a lot of different architecture and aesthetic. Like it's like it literally is darker and more modern. That I've always
Mm.
found really interesting. So I just love looking at it from like a creative standpoint. I also was just shocked by the fact that I wasn't the only creative there. Like, of course, you got your econ majors and
Mm.
your gov majors, but you also had so many artists. And I think that's the part I think I missed the most about Hamilton. Just like the singers, the dancers, the painters. I would just go to the art center and just watch people do their thing and just sit there with a notebook and like write poetry or like write a line of a short story. So I was so just like enamored and excited by the fact that I was completely surrounded by other creatives and
Hmm.
hearing the buffers sing. I was like, wow, like this is a different this is a different place. Acapella is a real thing outside of movies, outside of Pitch Perfect. Like, wow. And they're dead serious up there. Like they're having the time of their lives.
Yeah.
So that's something else that was really like shocking, but really fun to realize and discover at Hamilton. 'Cause at first, I thought a lot of these things were just like college movies type things. They're
Mm.
actually things that happened on the hill, which I thought was really funny.
Huh. And for someone coming from South Florida up to seeing snow for the first time, a lot of that can be culture shock. I imagine it helped having 9 other Floridians in the program with you. Did that help you acclimate a little bit more?
For sure, Dave. Like I definitely had a lot of fun getting to know myself in a new environment, but also the new environment itself with 9 other people, really 10 other people. I count Catherine Doran.
Mm.
They helped a lot, especially Catherine. Catherine gave us her coats, her old coats. Catherine was like, "Listen, you have to get good gloves." I forgot what the store was called. She took us to this gigantic store that had a bunch of gloves and coats. It's like what y'all brought was like South Florida South Florida winter coats. Need real winter coats. Just the fact that we had an excursion just for winter clothing is really funny to me. But they helped a lot, like mentally as well, because seasonal depression was really big in our posse, and
Hmm.
kind of reminding each other like, hey, like there are happy lamps, there are other resources to kind of help you out, and every
Interesting.
winter it's gonna come, and we're all tropical folk because not only are we from South Florida, but we're Haitian, we're Cuban, Nicaraguan, Puerto Rican, so we're coming
Yeah.
from like naturally tropical climates.
Yeah.
So that also was a big sort of adjustment. But when you do something together, it's 10 times easier. So it was definitely not as hard as it could have been had we just gone there like blind and not knowing what was ahead of us.
And then what, as you got more acclimated and got involved in things, what was keeping you busy when you were a student?
Dave, so many things. Honestly, I forget sometimes how much of a playground Hamilton was.
Hmm.
And not only did I have, of course, the four classes, I ran track. I was a hurdler. I ran indoor track and outdoor track, so that kept me busy for quite some time. But in the fall, I played rugby. I was a winger, different
Okay.
sport.
Okay.
Dave, I didn't even know
I knew there
rugby.
was a reason. Forget about anything else. We're just going to talk about rugby for the rest of this conversation. You're talking to fellow rugger here. I love it. I didn't even
No
know that.
way.
Oh yeah. Oh
Are you
yeah.
in the back of the pack?
I was a number 8. I was in
Number
the
eight.
pack. Yeah.
Love
I was
it.
8 man.
Love to see it. Oh my gosh. Wingers all day. It's a great time. Listen, Dave, I didn't know what rugby was until
Yeah.
Hamilton because my
You and me
friend from
both.
Montana, right? Okay, wow, I didn't. That's really cool. What? Okay, I feel better then because at least you're from the north, so maybe you would have heard of rugby. But no, you didn't know. Good. I feel better. But yeah, my friend from Montana was like, if you join rugby, I'll join track, and I was like, deal. Not knowing what rugby was, that's a different deal. Like those are two different
Yes, it is.
sports.
Yes, it is.
One has more bodily injury, but it was so much fun. Like, and also I will say the difference between the rugby team and the track team, the rugby team had such a tighter community. Like
Hmm.
those girls and I, as probably you had a similar experience with the men. Like it was like we went to war together. Like just the
Yep.
way we kind of convened, and we all ate together. We would go to the movies together, shop together. A lot of people lived together. It was just such a beautiful experience. And that when we were on the pitch together, it was, like you knew when someone said, "Hey, on your left, on your right, behind you," like they really were there to support you,
Yes. Yes.
and it became even almost poetic, and not only like on your left, on your right, but actually like traversing through the Hamilton environment, like, hey, I'm on your right, not
Yeah.
literally, but like I got your back, like
Yeah.
you're not alone in this thing called life, this thing called college life, to be specific.
It's true.
So that was
I,
also really cool to have
and I
that.
think there's something too. It's funny. I just had a conversation with David Solomon, who was also a rugby player, and we, of course, I couldn't help but talk about rugby with him.
Love it.
And one of the things we had talked about, and I think it's true to what you're saying, is to your point about not knowing the sport when you first got there.
Mm-hmm.
Few, if any, they may have heard of the sport, but few, if any, have actually played it when they arrive at Hamilton to play, right?
Yes.
And so, therefore, no matter how good of an athlete you are, at that age, it's odd to start a new sport and learn something new and have everyone learning it together.
Yes.
And I think that adds to that sense of camaraderie. And it's not unlike when you join, when you step foot on campus for the first time as a first year,
Yes.
just learning how to be on your own. So you're all learning together, and that binds you together. And then you add that rugby thing into it. It can't help but bind people together. And it's a
So
fun
true.
sport, and it's good, and it's
So
team
fun.
sport and all that. Yeah, exactly.
It's funny, Dave, when you said that, like learning a new sport, like it being different, like learning at that age. The amount of times I ran ahead of the ball was iconic, and I would not catch it. The first time I ever played rugby, I thought I was this big hot shot. I played so many sports in high school, middle school, elementary school. I was like, oh, this is easy. It's like football, whatever. The amount of times I was so excited to run, I
Yeah,
just did not catch the ball. I
yeah.
was saying, okay, I'm on your left. They would throw it to me, ball's out of my hands. I'm still running down the field. I'm like, Kyandreia, where are you going? I'm like, yeah, I
We
forgot the most important part, the
I
ball.
was the team one of the team captains my junior and senior year, and we didn't have a coach. We were very defiant, didn't want a coach, which meant that the captains were essentially the coaches. So here I am a junior. I've been playing the sport for 3 years. What the hell do I know? And I'd have rookies come up to me and be like, "Well, why? What is it? Why? What is this rule? Or why is this?" And I'd be like, well, "I don't know. The referee said it last week, so I'm repeating it. I don't know."
That's so funny. Hey, but that's really empowering though for your captain to say, I don't know. So you feel okay with not knowing things. So I'm sure in the
That's a really
end
good point.
it helped them out. I was like, oh, he's no, I don't know. Cool. I'm
Right.
fine. We'll just figure it out together, like you said. Have fun.
That's right. That's right. So, you mentioned you were interested in writing even before Hamilton, and certainly every student that goes there gets beaten into their head that you're going to learn how to write whether you like it or not. You clearly liked it.
Hmm.
Um, so I imagine that just your love of writing only got solidified at Hamilton.
For sure, for sure. I've always wanted to write creatively, but to appease my grandparents who raised me, I was like, you know what? I'll learn how to write for everything. So I got to write journalistically, academically, and creatively, of course, as well. And Hamilton sharpened all three of those things. I wrote for The Spectator. I ended up becoming a writing center tutor, which is really cool. So I actually got a taste of everyone's writing on campus. It was super cool to read different subjects because I would never take a history class. definitely not econ, definitely not government. Because like, all three of those things sounded just really intimidating to the departments themselves. But reading the work of the students who had those classes, it was really inspiring and really exciting to see a glimpse to the courses. So that definitely helped a lot. But I struggled my first semester at Hamilton. I thought, again, just like with rugby and sports, I was like, oh, I've been writing for forever. I feel like I have a good handle because, public school in South Florida, I'm a bit of a hot shot. Hamilton's rigor and Hamilton's emphasis on writing was definitely different.
Yeah.
And I quickly learned in my first writing intensive course that I would have to rise to the challenge of better writing and more informed professors who want you to get better at from paper to paper. So I definitely did get that sort of humbling first paper back of like
what kind of things made like how did you get better? What did you need to improve, do you think?
Definitely the writing center for one, not just because I ended up working for them years later, but I was obsessed with them. It's funny to me now to think about it as a former tutor and what I must have looked like coming in there day in and day out. But the writing center helped a lot. Also talked to my professors. It's funny again to think about who I was freshman year because it's so dissimilar to who I became by senior year of like not wanting to talk to professors. And now I'm like, knock knock, like, hello, I have a question about this paper. So I'm in my freshman year, my first year. I was very nervous to talk to professors, but people were very nice and they cared about the work, they cared about the writing. So that also helped. It was that and the writing center that helped me.
And was the plan to be a writer and be an author come graduation?
Yes. I very strangely wanted to be published by 16. Why? I don't know. Why that age? I don't know. Did I want to drive, Dave? No, I didn't want to drive. But I wanted to be published by 16. That did not happen. But I was published by 20. So my junior year of Hamilton, Catherine Dorn actually sent me an email of someone looking for writers. And the email mentioned another professor's daughter. Her name is Yam, and the professor's name is O'Dampton, Professor O'Dampton. And his daughter said that a friend of hers is looking for a writer. And I was like, hey, I'm a writer. So I ended up emailing Yam, and Yam connected me to someone named Melissa. And I didn't know what I was signing up for, but I was like, hey, I'm a writer. I want to write. It's a paid opportunity. Let's go try. So I emailed Melissa, and she turned out to be the associate editor of Choose Your Own Adventure, Choose Co. LLC. And she's like, I really love the way you conduct yourself via email. I would love to talk to you on the phone. And I'm thinking like, I love writing emails. Like, I don't know why. I just associate them with like letters. I was like, dearest Dave, may this email find you well. It just makes me laugh. I have a great time. I read them in British accents. It's a whole thing. But I was sitting in Beinecke at Hamilton, just like hiding under, I guess it's like where a fireplace is, I think, and just close to the diner. And I'm sitting there, kind of nervous. My legs are drawn on the couch, and I'm talking to Melissa. She's like, "Yeah, I love the way you conduct yourself via email. You seem like a really great fit for this opportunity. You wrote a short story about this Black soldier named James who comes back home to the States and finds that life is very different. How would you like to write for Choose Your Own Adventure, their new series called the Choose Your Own Adventure Spy Series?" I was like, you had me at right, so tell me more. And she was like, it's a new series. So have you ever heard of Choose Your Own Adventure? I'm like, actually, no, I have not. But I'm down to learn about it. So she sent me, she's like, oh yeah, if you're interested, I'll send you like the contract and I'll send you some material so you can get a sense of the material. And also, even if you're not able to write it, because Choose Adventure is very finicky, you'll still get, a sum for just signing the contract and trying. I was like, what? Of course I'm going to take this opportunity because I'm getting paid either way. Like, what? That's the silliest thing I ever heard. I was like, okay, I'll try. But it was funny because I sent her she asked me for some writing materials in our initial email. I sent her a monologue about women in the workforce, breaking the glass ceiling. I sent her a poem about my brother going through puberty, me finding that disgusting. Then I sent her this short story about this African-American soldier who, again, comes home to find that his country betrays him. And I don't know what of those three said children's books to her, but when she sent me the books, I was like, oh, it's a children's book? Like, Melissa, you should have told me. I would have sent you something a little lighter. Like, these are all, like, harder topics, but it was really funny to me. And then so I just started digesting all this material. I have so many Choose Code books around my room. And my aunt was like, oh, I used to read this when I was a kid. I was
Yeah.
like, that's so weird. This is so funny. So I'm reading all these books and it's super weird because, we have the choices, as you know. Choose Your Adventure is a game book series in which you are the main character of the story for your listeners. And you get to decide from beginning to end what happens. And so I'm looking at it like, this is super weird, but I'm reading about this spy during the American Revolution named James Armistead Lafayette. I was like, I just wrote a character named James. That seems, again, like serendipity. It seems awesome. So I was like, all right. And I found out that he was this enslaved person who helped General James Armistead Lafayette and General George Washington win America's independence. He found intel about the Battle of Yorktown, which is the battle ultimately that wins the war. I didn't take a history class in Hamilton. I'm just regurgitating information. But so then I found out about him. It wasn't that much material to go off of, but the beautiful part about historical fiction, half of it, not even half, really, a quarter maybe, is
hit a couple of the key facts and then go off on your own. And
exactly.
Yeah.
I got to write about creepy magical children. I got to write about squirrels being a part of the revolution. Got to write about just like witches in the woods. It was very weird. Very, very weird. It was funny for people like, this is supposed to be history. I'm like, it's not. It's historical fiction. So good luck. They're like, the squirrels were they really part of the revolution? I'm like, I'd like to think so. I don't know if that's true. But that's pretty much how I got the opportunity to write for Choose Your Own Adventure. And the rest is pretty much history. After I wrote my first introduction to the book, just to see if I can do it, because it's this big, this big challenge, which is the worst thing you can say to me. Like, we're athletes, we're competitive. I was like, oh, most writers aren't able to write it. Okay, so I sent my my eventual editor Melissa. I sent her the first 20 pages. She says, how'd you take to the form? And I was like, because you gave me a challenge and now I had to rise to meet it. But I will say, Dave, later on when I wrote my second Choose Your Adventure book, the intro was not that good. So I was immediately humbled. So
what is the process? How, I mean, it's not just writing a linear story, right? You have to have different paths, and how do you map that out? And is there a format that you should follow, or do you have to think about multiple storylines? It seems, yes. It's not just, I'm going to write a nice little kids book. You have to write almost several different stories.
Yes. Well, shout out to your kids who you said like the books.
Forget about my kids. No, look, I can close my eyes and see in my mind's eye the shelf in my elementary school library where all the Choose Your Own Adventure books were. I loved them.
So precious.
I loved them. And
precious.
I think so. My daughter has some and enjoys them as well. But I think I'm the real Choose Your Own Adventure fan. Although I will admit, I tended to cheat a lot. Right? Did you go to page 12 or page 30? Go to 30. Oh no, it ends there. No, we'll go to page 12.
That's very funny. And
that's a confession I'm making to you is that I cheated on the Choose Your Own Adventure.
I love it. That's so funny. Hey, is it cheating, or are you trying to, win the game of life? Sometimes in life you gotta figure things out before you can.
There you go.
If you have foresight and if you could be a fortune teller in your life, wouldn't you try to be that?
There you go. Hey,
listen, young Dave and I, we would get along.
That's right.
But also, thank you for being a reader. That's awesome.
Of
Super
course.
Cool that you're a fan. So it's also the best feeling in the world to meet fans of like every generation. It's like, oh my gosh, it gives new meaning and purpose to what I do. It's like, oh, this is why I should make them good. Okay, that should be a reason.
I mean, it's like the red, on the top, like it's iconic, and if you grew up reading those, you recognize them right away. And I was excited when I think I saw the school, put out a press release or say, publicize the fact that you had published the first one. I was like, oh yeah, Choose Your Own Adventure. That's so cool. But yeah, I'm curious about the process.
Okay. So to talk about the process, let me see if I remember the madness that it was the first book. The first book actually wasn't that bad in that, again, I had a lot more liberty with the history because it was so limited. So really a really important thing I should state first, I guess, is that I write the introduction, and the introduction is only about 6 pages or so. And once I do that, the first choice is the most important choice. And that was instilled in me very quickly with my publisher and editor. I was like, okay, the first choice is really important. And luckily for James, the first book, the first choice is very easy. He's an enslaved person. General Marquis de Lafayette shows up after James himself saves his plantation from a fire. There's something that he needs in this moment, and I think it's freedom. So like the first choice is whether or not he joins the Revolutionary Army, as he did in history, or find freedom on his own terms. To me, it was a very empowered choice. It was very easily easy for me to make and to want children to make, because it gave James something he never had, which is agency. So
Hmm.
that was the easy part. And then I had to pretty much come up with a list of possibilities, or as you know them, choices.
Hmm.
So you can do this, or you can do this. And I had to do that for at least two threads on the onset, because the first two choices, each choice has a list of possibilities that come after it.
Hmm.
And so what helped me keep track of all the choices and the tracks were, for one, Melissa, the editor, and also this list of numbers. So it's a number like 1 to 100. So like I said earlier, let's say I used the introduction and it took like 6 pages. So I
Hmm.
have that sheet of 1 to 1 to, I think it was actually 125. So I would cross off numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then for the book itself, for the choices, if it was on page 9, I'll cross out page 9. The other choices on page 12, I'll cross out page 12 and kind of work in the middle and keep doing that for the rest of the process.
Hmm.
I'm happy to say that I didn't go all beautiful mind and have a bunch of like pictures all over the room and a bunch of string like a serial killer. Um, so that was fun. It was actually like playing a game in itself. The writing of it, just like reading it's kind of like a game. So I would
Hmm.
just kind of go and write to a choice. So let's say for the introduction, like I said, the choices were you go to the army or you find freedom by yourself. So I would say, okay, Kiana, today I'm going to write the freedom by yourself track up until a choice.
Hmm.
And so we would write up, so we would go, oh, you found freedom by yourself. You're like, he goes into the woods, James goes into the woods. And then, oh, you hear something. Like, do you acknowledge the sound or do you keep moving? So I would pretty much just write to the choice and keep playing that game until the
Hmm.
book is done. Most of the time, I would try to go from one thread to the next. So, like I said, I would start off with the you found freedom by yourself, but the other choice was you go into the army. So instead of going from you found freedom by yourself to whatever the choices were and write those tracks, I would actually go back to the you join the army to kind of have a sense of different, and so I don't get too boggled down in the details of one thread at a time. I would actually go
Hmm.
back and forth to make it
Oh,
interesting, make it
interesting.
fun. But sometimes I would forget, like, oh, is this the path with the crazy squirrels or the path with the witch? So I had to kind of like go back and figure out what happened. And so I knew, hey, but what helped me as well, I knew that there were crazy witches, Dave. There could not be squirrels because that's too much in a single thread. So that actually helped me a lot to go back and see, oh, there's a squirrel here. There's no witches. Or this is the history track. Most likely the history track would have more history versus the fictional element. So the path of the you find freedom by yourself
Uh-huh.
actually inherently has more fictional and strange choices and threads than the you join the army track.
Got it. So when you say the first choice is the most important choice, that's because you're essentially writing two stories. That branches off from there, two stories. Do the storylines branch back into each other at certain points, or like can you cheat and have a page that will be in either storyline, or are they two separate tracks completely?
That's a great question, Dave, because a lot of Choose co-writers have different techniques, and some writers do write and combine them. I
Hmm.
do not know how to do that yet. So my threads do not intersect because that
Okay.
would just make my brain
Okay.
go, it would just explode. So for the most part, they're quite different. Except, well, for James, it's quite different. For Mary, there are more similarities because in the introduction, you actually have a lot of space to use for the rest of the book because we all know what happened in the beginning because that
Hmm.
never changes. So for James, for the most part, there's a lot more liberty. But for Mary, we actually start in the Confederate White House. And so we know that there's someone who just found out that Mary Bowser, who was actually a spy during the Civil War, and she did infiltrate the Confederate White House under Jefferson Davis. So we know immediately that she's a spy. And we know that she knows she's a spy, unlike James, who just a formerly enslaved person who became a spy, who then became a double agent. So we know Mary's a spy, and we know that someone just found out she's a spy. So that information is constantly relevant throughout the rest of the book, no matter which path you take.
Hmm.
So that's pretty much what distinguishes the book, often the intro itself. And then for the most part, once you split, things stay split unless it's something that was stated in the introduction. Then it can come
Got it.
back more
Got it.
freely. But
Interesting.
also certain facts that are interesting because with Mary Bowser, there was a lot more text about her. So certain things could be relevant, not only in the one track, but also in another, because you're constantly getting new information about this real person
Hmm.
who has a history that's more available to us.
Got it. And you have one more forthcoming. Is that right?
I do. I do. I have a book called The Ghost on the Mountain, and it's different from the Choose Your Own Adventure books that we're talking about because it's for a younger audience.
Hmm.
It's also a Choose Your Own Adventure Dragon Lark instead of a spy book, and so
Okay.
it's very short and it's more heavily illustrated. The illustrations are colorful because again, it's for a younger audience. But it takes place, unlike the other two spy books with Mary Bowser and James Armistead Lafayette, who were real historical figures. This book takes place with the subject, with a you, right, the main character, who is completely of my own design. This little girl who is traveling to Haiti to visit her grandma, and it was a lot of fun because I didn't have to even try to have anything real in it, like anything historical. So I just got to have a lot of fun. And the first thing that happens is that she's in her room and a ghost appears. So you already know it's gonna be a wild tale, but it's about family and belonging and the beautiful part of knowing where you come from and how where you come from always will always receive you as you are because you're from there.
Sprinkle a little bit of yourself in that one there.
Oh yes, yes. My
Yeah.
mom's side of the family, they're Haitian. My dad's side, they're African Americans. My mom's side will be happy. My dad's side will have to deal with the other two spy books.
does does having gone through this process a few times now of writing these choose your own adventure books, what do you take into other writing? I know that I'm sure this isn't the only kind of writing you are doing or want to do. Does it make it easier, harder to break that mold, or like how does it influence your future writing, you think?
That's a great question. There's so many ways I can answer that. For the most part, something I will say, which is really, really important to me, is that Choose Your Own Adventure books, specifically writing for children, taught me how to write with hope. Because you can
Hmm.
probably tell from the things I mentioned and what I submitted to Melissa, because I didn't know I was writing for a children's book or could have. Most of the things that I wrote were dark and emotional, and they often centered around like race or sex or country, gender. So it was really interesting to have to write for kids because when you write for kids, you inherently have to write with hope in mind and with
Hmm.
joy in mind, and excitement in mind. And so even writing about slavery, which is just it's a sad topic to say the least. Even doing that to write it for kids is like, how do I tackle this topic in a way that is truthful and sincere, but also somehow full of hope. And it wasn't that hard once I thought about who I was writing for and why I was writing for them. And I got to empower not only my subject, which is James and Mary, these formerly enslaved people, but I got to empower the reader themselves. Like, hey, like we can always choose to be kind to each other. We can always choose to empower each other. And so in my other writing, which I started writing, well, I guess I started the journey of writing for film and television during the pandemic because we all had too much time on our hands and I don't know how to bake bread. So the first thing I did was the thing I always do, which is to write. And I've always wanted to write for film and television. I've always had an interest in screenwriting. I took playwriting at Hamilton, but that's a different beast. It's a different
Hmm.
beast. So I was really excited to just get in the world of screenwriting. It was very hard, very, very different, Dave. And you think I'll be up to the challenge because Choose Adventure is also very different,
Hmm.
but it was very intimidating at first. I think also the the sort of, I guess, not even bravado, but confidence and excitement I had as a Hamilton student my first year versus as a senior, I had more skills, but also I think the big bad world looks a little badder when you're just entering
When you
into it
get
as
sure.
this. Yeah,
Yeah.
this adult who's not really adult because you were just eating like Gorp and eating in McEwen and Commons and traversing a campus that's only a 7 minute walk from beginning to end.
Yeah.
So it was really weird to be of this real world.
And you were entering that real world at a pretty crazy time.
Oh my goodness. Thankfully, the pandemic happened, a couple of months after I graduated.
Yeah.
But even still, it was very strange to say, like, hey, here's this great big world for you. And
That's
then
now shut down.
also
Yeah.
apocalypse. Like this, like
Right.
what's
Right.
happening?
Right.
Yeah, so that was very, very shocking, but not that surprising to me, honestly. I don't know why, because again, I'm used to writing about doom and gloom. So when the pandemic happened, I was like, of course, of course, I knew it. I knew there was something like gonna happen that was horrifying. But so
It's
also,
interesting. It's interesting to hear you talk about writing about doom and gloom, but then doing choose your own adventure and being hopeful. Because
mhm.
talking to you, and you said it like you jokingly said before, I'm weird, and you have an incredible sense of humor, obviously. So that seems like that the mix of doom and gloom and I won't say bubbly, but positive nature is inherent in you. Where do you think that's coming from?
Wow, for one, thank you, Dave. That's nice. Honestly, I'm really excited to talk to you. So you get, of course, you get that excitement, and then you talk about rugby. I'm like, what is
Yeah,
happening, Dave?
yeah,
But it definitely comes from one, the excitement, two, the work of writing for Choose Co. It taught me a lot about hope, but also the pandemic itself. Like we're still living in an apocalypse, like whether we want to
sure,
acknowledge it still or not.
sure.
So to be grateful and to be excited for the future is very, very. It's not something I take lightly. And also just doing what I love, even at small capacities, even in doing it in a way that is constantly a learning curve.
Hmm.
I think all of that really keeps me honest. Of course, community that helps a lot. Like my thesis for at Hamilton was a poetry thesis. It was called CNN and Other Contraceptives. Just to give you a sense of my humor, my dark
Okay,
humor,
okay.
and also just the doom and gloom. So I do think like life itself kind of makes it really easy to have both hopelessness and hope. That is the
Hmm.
poetry of life. It's sometimes things hit you like a pandemic and it's so devastating and it's so hard to watch the world crumble as you know it. But also the fact that you yourself can rise from the ashes that are in its wake, like that in itself is a reason to be hopeful. So I think that's also what keeps me hopeful, that sort of constant contrast, but also, oh hey, there's breath in my lungs somehow, some way. So I
Hmm.
guess that in itself should give me a reason to be hopeful and to extend that hope to people I'm talking to.
So what are you writing next? You mentioned screen. What's cooking for you?
Oh my gosh, so many things, Dave. I'm constantly writing, so I assume that's how you get paid opportunities.
Ah,
So I wrote over 25 short screenplays. I'm trying to get at least one of them made. A lot of eggs, different baskets.
yeah.
Um, so that's one thing I've been working on, and then I just finished my TV pilot. I did a workshop with the New York Film Academy, an online workshop, and that was really helpful and fun. So I got to write my TV pilot. I'm taking a 3 week hiatus, Dave, because I don't know how to stop writing because it's kind
Hmm.
of how I understand the world. So when things are burning around me, I'm like, oh, let's put that to page and see how we, smolder the embers and get that fire down to dust. So that's pretty much how I understand the world around me. But also it's like if you stop and don't write, Kyandra, what will you learn? Just living in the world as everybody else who does not write to live
Hmm.
and live to write. So that's something else that I've been working on, like taking breaks in between my projects. I'm really big on like one thing after the other.
Hmm.
But after that, I want to write a feature, a feature, a children and family feature. I love Pixar, so I'm trying to get close to them. I don't know
Okay.
how, Dave. I don't know. I don't
Okay.
know. I don't know how, but I'm gonna figure it out.
All right. Well,
And
to the Hamilton community listening now, let's help
hey,
Kendra out.
Hamlet's community,
There you go.
help me, help me write for Pixar or at Pixar. That would be awesome. So yes, the feature film, which is gonna be children and family feature film, because again, Choose Code did inspire my writing a lot, and I tried to go from not necessarily doom and gloom, but dramedy, comedy to writing for children and family.
Hmm.
Then after that, I'll pursue. So it's weird with screenwriting that to like have an agent or apply to contests and fellowships, it's a good idea to not only have an original pilot, which I just wrote, but also something called a spec. And a spec is when you write a script based off of an established running TV show.
Yep.
So I have to write a spec, which is going to be weird. But I'm hoping, Dave, that my writing for Choose Your Own Adventure helps me. Because I had to learn how to write essentially as every other Choose Your Own Adventure writer with a twist, hopefully add something of myself into these books. And I hope in
Mm,
the same way I can do that with like the idea of a spec. So taking another writer's concept and characters and making it my own
yeah.
in an engaging way for whoever's reading it.
Okay. And then, do you see any more Choose Your Own Adventure books in your future? You gonna keep doing
Dave,
that?
I hope Dave.
You
Listen, as
hope.
long as they have my
If
number,
they keep asking, you'll keep doing.
if they keep asking, I will figure out a way.
Okay.
That's always the plan because it is a
Okay.
lot of fun. And the best part of it is like even in this conversation we talked about like the generations and you having the Choose Code books like in your library and your daughter has a few. Like I love having access to kids in a way that is inherently like enriched by our shared passion of either reading, writing, or just having an adventure.
Hmm.
So that's something else that empowers me to hope and keeps me honest and humbled and excited because kids will humble you. If you go up to a kid and say, I am a dinosaur connoisseur, they'll say, yes, you are. Like they have no idea that you have to earn being a writer, being an author, being a speaker for them. They're just like, oh, you came to me as a speaker? You're Miss Kyandreia Jones? Okay, awesome. I believe you. I see the book in your hand. That's evidence.
Yeah.
So I think that's also something that I love. And the more I get to write books, the more I get to bring books to kids and different kids of every creed and culture, which is super cool. So that also keeps me wanting to write choose and adventure books and wanting to write children and family films because as you can see, I don't know if you heard this wave of Encanto, it's really great
Yep.
to have adults and kids just fall in love with the idea of like magic and wonder and hope and joy in a world gone mad.
I just saw a headline talked about how the song, the Bruno song, is more popular
We'll
than
talk about Bruno.
Yeah, more popular than Let It Go. That's insane.
And the fact that they're both from animated films is just
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Right.
Let It Go is an anthem, so that's
Oh,
super
it's been
funny.
played in my house more times than I care to admit.
That's amazing. That's so funny.
Although the Encanto soundtrack is getting played a bit too. So you talked about being published at 20. And if there was a Hamilton student, 18, 19, 20-year-old Hamilton student here who has a similar dream of being published, what kind of advice would you give to a budding Hamilton writer?
I love this question. Thank you, Dave. Because it's so important. And I think my answer, I don't know if it's surprising because it's not surprising to me. It's kind of like tickling yourself. But it is really important in that people know your passion. So important that the people around you know what makes you happy, what makes you excited, and things you want to pursue. Because then they become your advocates, hopefully, in the best possible ways. So I would say always talk about your passion. Of course, in moderation, because people will be like, all right, like we get it, Dave. You like rugby. But if you really care about it and people see that excitement, it's very contagious. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing that also keeps me writing is the fact that so many people in the Hamilton community, yourself included, Dave, reach out to me like, hey, Kyandreia, you're a writer. I'm like, what? I am? It never gets old. So if you're a writer and if you're looking for opportunity, of course, leverage your connections in the Hamilton community. Us alumni are always here to help, but also make sure the people around you, your professors, your peers even. I have peers to this day who send me stuff like, hey, Kyandreia, you're into film now. Here goes this fellowship you can apply to. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. So the same thing is true for you. Like you might not think that you're in a position to have access to opportunity because, oh, hey, I'm a first year, I'm a second year, I'm a third year. But I got my opportunity in my third year at Hamilton just by talking to my posse mentor about the things I love and care about. And I would say back up your talk with your peers and professors and friends with a portfolio of work. It doesn't have to be that much. It doesn't have to be extensive, but it has to be something that says, I'm a writer and I wrote something. Because once you have that, it's harder for opportunities to fly by or for people to dismiss you. Because I said to Melissa after she asked me for writing samples, I don't have any. I don't think I would be where I am today.
Right.
Where I am today. So to be able to say I'm a writer or I'm an artist, I'm a poet, I am a painter. Make sure you have a painting. Make sure you have
do the thing. Do the thing.
So once you do the thing, it's proof that you can get something done. And that is always really, really fun to leverage and to know. Because the big thing people feel is imposter syndrome, which is strange to me. Because I'm like, if you got there, there's a reason for it. So maybe you just walk back your accomplishments and ask yourself, how did I get here? How did I get to talking to Dave? Well, my third year of Hamilton. So you kind of do the work of, I do belong in this seat. I am worthy of having this conversation. So that's also something really important. Don't shorthand yourself and don't act like you don't know who you are and what you've done to get to where you are.
That's really good advice. That's good advice for students. That's good advice for 45-year-old people who work in marketing like myself.
Yes, yes.
I'm writing that down. You're wise beyond your years.
Thank you. It's my grandparents. They raised me.
There you go.
I'm an old lady.
So I asked this of just about everybody. I'm very curious to hear your take on this. As you think back to that young gal who had the wrong coat coming up to Hamilton, is there anything you wish you had known?
I love this question. I wish I had known to lead with joy. At Hamilton, when I first started my first year, I took everything so serious. Even like the wrong coat. I was like, I have to get a right coat. How could I have gotten the wrong coat? So I think at Hamilton, it's so easy to get lost in your own seriousness and to be so in love with getting the right grades, meeting the right people, having the right experiences. But if you just lead with joy instead of this fear of not doing all the right things at the right time in the right moments, you'd probably have more fun and you probably would get better grades. I actually found out during a track meeting once that the best thing you can feel before any opportunity, any test is excitement. So if we lead with joy, we lead with excitement, I think we would be better off. So I wish I knew that going into Hamilton, because I think, we think we're so successful now. Imagine if we did the thing with a smile on our face and with, love in our heart, hope in our heart. So I wish I had known to first lead with joy and get things done with a smile on my face.
All right, that's Kyandreia Jones, class of 2019. Her next Choose Your Own Adventure book, The Ghost on the Mountain, is available for pre-order on Amazon. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. You can also buy Kyandreia's first two books at CYOA.com. CYOA, Choose Your Own Adventure. CYOA.com. We'll have a link to that in the show notes as well, so go ahead and check those out. My thanks to Kyandreia for joining. It was really a pleasure to get to know her. You have been listening to Had I Known at WHCL-FM, Clinton, New York. HadIKnown.buzzsprout.com. Had I Known Show on social media. As always, my thanks to Dr. Michael Woods for supplying the music on the show. And, once again, Doc is going to play us out. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll talk to you next week.
thine own podcast show on your radio or take it to go.